Good morning and welcome to the first of our TLC fall programs. We're delighted to have so many of you here to learn about AI, and we'll look forward to learning about what AI has in store for all of us. I want to tell you a little bit about the rest of the fall programming on October 15th. We're going to gather in this same space again for a program on the Pearl. The Pearl is our neighbor across Moorhead Street, and it's home to the Atrium Wake Forest Medical School and EarCAD, which is a surgical training and research center. Our speakers that morning will include Amaya Daniel. She is the senior business analyst for the Pearl, and also Marcus Kimbrough. He is the local government lead and community engagement strategist for Atrium Health. We hope you'll join us for that presentation on this exciting new addition to Charlotte. We're going to take a fall trip in November. On November 12th, we're going to travel to Kannapolis to visit the North Carolina Music Hall of Fame. Did you even know that existed? Well, we're going to visit it and enjoy it, and then we'll also tour or visit a NASCAR facility there in Kannapolis also, and then we'll have lunch before returning back to Covenant. There's no charge for the trip, so please join us as we celebrate the music of North Carolina. And be sure to mark your calendar for our annual TLC Bingo Party on December 3rd. Once again, we're going to be gathering treats and drinks for the TLC snack cart at Highland Renaissance. So we'll be asking you to bring drinks or a Christmas-themed snack to add to that cart. Last year, we took the cart sometime right before Christmas, and those people that delivered the snack cart said it was just delightful to see. It goes up and down the halls, and teachers come out of their classrooms and pick out snacks and drinks. So it's a great way for us to support our friends at Highland. We'll also have wonderful refreshments. We'll have trivia. We'll have our bingo. And we hope you will join us in all that fun. That's on December 3rd. And it'll be at 10:30. We'll have refreshments, and then we'll move on to the fun. And now I'll turn it over to Serenity, who's going to introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Betty. Like she said, I have the privilege of introducing our speaker today, and I told her I'm going to try to not fumble through her beautiful introduction. Dr. Cori Faklaris is an assistant professor at UNC Charlotte's College of Computing and Informatics, where she directs the Security and Privacy Experiences Group. Her focus is on understanding people's needs and designing for safe, secure, and trustworthy computing, including artificial intelligence. See, I told you I was going to do it. In this interdisciplinary work, Faklaris draws on methods from social science, computer science, data science, and machine learning, cybersecurity, and design. She also employs skills and knowledge from her past careers in journalism, IT, and social media. Among other accomplishments, she's received a 2024 Google Research Scholar Award. Let's clap it up. For work to connect people with advice about their security and privacy concerns. Her work is also funded by Basis Labs, LLC founder Carl Hoffman, the U.S. Army Research Lab, and the U.S. National Science Foundation. We are thrilled to have you, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for attending today. I really appreciate having an audience. I told somebody beforehand, this gives me a chance also to refresh my knowledge because I have to make sure I'm telling you true things and that also they're actually useful things that not just an academic like me needs to know. So thank you for that wonderful introduction. I did write it and I used a lot of big words, so it's not your fault that you stumbled over some of them. Yeah, and so that just gives you a little bit more about me. And I'd like to say, if you have any questions that are not about AI, but about anything that I do, such as security and privacy, or it could be a lot of things. You could ask me questions about me. You can ask me questions about UNC Charlotte. I'm happy to take those as well. Of course, we're all here to talk about AI. And so here are the key takeaways I have from today's presentation. And that asterisk says, just to note, I used AI to write the presentation. So I had the final authorship, but it's definitely a tool that I use for a lot of things, including this. So these are the things that it suggested, and then I refined that I would talk to you about. First of all, I want you to understand AI as a tool and not a brain. It is not alive. It's not going to be alive, I promise you. Use AI when you use it, and I want you to use it as a helpful assistant. So I'll talk about this. I always specify what I want it to do. I verify what it showed me as the output, and then I revise it. So none of this came right out of the AI. I also revised it thoroughly. And the third thing, and this gets more to the wisdom and purpose for AI, we should still prioritize human connection over automation. And so while I do think it's wonderful that we have so many fancy machines now that can automate things that we don't want to do, we should always remember to center the human. And we shouldn't have these machines replace genuine human connection. And this is great. We're having a genuine human connection today. This is what it's all about. And fourth, and this really gets to the stewardship, and I feel that value very deeply in my life, we should protect our own and others' sensitive personal data. And so that means not feeding it data that we wouldn't share with strangers. That's very important because you'll get to know these AIs and trust them. And you need to keep in mind, these are not your family. These are corporations. So first we'll talk about understanding AI. This is adapted from a talk I first gave in 2023. I also teach a course on human-centered AI. So a lot of this is what I tell my students. So when you hear AI, you should think statistical pattern matching. That's what it's doing. So Oracle describes AI this way. So this is artificial intelligence. This term has become a catch-all term for applications that perform complex tasks that once required human input, such as communicating with customers online. Certainly AI can do that now, or playing chess. It's also very good at that. I play chess too. I don't want it to take that away from me. So the term is often used interchangeably with other terms such as machine learning. We often abbreviate that as ML. And if you were at UNC Charlotte, you'd hear us say ML more often than AI. And deep learning, which is a special type of machine learning that more closely reflects the way that we know our human brains work. So there's lots of different AI in the world under lots of different names. And you've been using AI for about 30 years now in various guises. You just never thought about it that way. Because under the hood, your phone, your search results, your Amazon, they're using AI to do lots of different things for you. So I have a diagram here. I don't know that this is going to show up too well, but so if we read it from left to right, we start with a whole bunch of data. And so that's why for many, many years, you've been able to enjoy free services on the internet. We needed a lot of data. You gave us data. Great. We took that data and then we can split it into two different batches of data. So a big batch is called training data. And so that's used to train this statistical model on how to do this statistical pattern matching. And that on the top level, we use that to build the system. So that's one thing we do. But in that smaller part of the data, we use that to test the model. And so that's going to check the correctness of the system. So in the same way that with my human students, I feed them a bunch of data in my courses that I've picked. I know it's good for them. And I use that to build their mental model and their learning. Then at the end of the semester, I feed them different data in an exam or a project. And I use that to test how well they've learned my mental model. So there are some parallels that we've learned from human learning and cognition. But at the basis of this is about statistical methods. It's actually, I say it's simple to do. That doesn't mean it's easy. But I think of it as fairly simple to do once you get into computing. We can teach our first years to do a simple, very simple version of this. And so here's another word that I might use because I can't avoid using fancy words all the time. The data, when we're feeding it into this process, it's tokenized. So that means it's being made into these little chunks of words, punctuation marks, pixels if we're feeding it images and video. So we just need it in smaller pieces. And so we do that during this process. I'm going to use that word later. So that's why I'm mentioning the word tokenizing right now. So I want to stop though and also talk about automation and AI. These are actually related, but they're somewhat separate. And so when I'm thinking of automation, I'm thinking of like my washing machine, right? That's automation. It's not smart. It does repetitive tasks, and that's something I wanted to do. I don't want to wash clothes myself, and it was broken, and it was a bad thing for me this fall. Yeah, it doesn't learn over time. If I put a red shirt in with my sheets, it's not going to learn next time to warn me or something or refuse to wash them. It's not going to do that. It does aim to mimic a human activity, but not necessarily human cognition or intelligence. It's a pretty dumb machine. I love it. It's a critical machine, but it's pretty dumb. It does follow instructions. That's why I love it, right? It always does what I want it to do until it breaks. And then it does not necessarily use any data outside of what is required for the self-contained tasks it is programmed to do. So for instance, it doesn't care what the air temperature is. It doesn't care how high my water bill is. I mean, a smart washing machine might care about that. It just knows I have this input data from you that you want to do a deep water wash, you want warm wash water, you want cold rinse water, and you're going to do an extra cycle because it's whites. That's what the data I feed it into, and then it does its thing. So artificial intelligence does step it up quite a bit. So with artificial intelligence, we can do dynamic tasks and it can extrapolate. So that means if I tell it, say repeatedly, that I want chicken in my grocery order, eventually it'll put chicken in my automated grocery list without me asking for it. It knows how to extrapolate from the orders I've already given it. Yeah, so it will learn over time. And sometimes we do have to watch that, just like you would with a child, that it's not learning the wrong things. So don't do the equivalent of swearing with AI, unless you want it to swear. It is able to mimic some aspects of human cognition and intelligence. So there's some, just like I used the example a little earlier, I would train an AI just like I would kind of train my human students. So that's for like very low level learning tasks, like where the students need to remember certain things. I want things to be in their long-term memory. And so that's very similar thing sometimes to what the AI system, how you would train it. I want certain data also in its long-term memory, especially guidelines on how it should treat humans. It evolves its own instructions. So I don't need to tell it everything. It already has a lot of training data that it can learn from and extrapolate from. So I can actually ask its advice even. I can say, what do you think is a good way to structure a talk to this particular church on this topic? And it uses data to become smart. I love data. It's a fun, dancey kind of thing for me. Data is my happy place. And so we do need the data. And yeah, there's lots of reasons why that has gone wrong, or there's been some issues, let's say, with how we collect and then disseminate data. That's a lot of what I study and work to improve. But at the end of the day, that's what these technologies are built on. So as long as they have enough data, AI models now can generate part or all of a creative work. This is the thing that's really new, like in the last 6 to 7 years. So when I say you've been using AI for about 30 years, it's not this type of AI. Until, say, 2017, AI models couldn't generate anything that seemed creative. And when I say creative works, this includes lots of different things that used to be only for humans. So it could be business functions such as reading and writing documents, creating a table or a figure to summarize data. That's a huge time saver right now. Programming. It can do computer programming. Maybe not well yet, but it will do it well eventually. And also, it can draft presentations or training. It could replace me. In fact, there's lots of proposals in startups to replace college level learning. I don't really have an opinion on that. I do think that, there's a place for human training, just like there's a place for AI training. And it's really up to society to figure some of this out. But I have some thoughts, obviously. And you have seen some examples already, I know, in the media, or maybe you're even using these, some publicly available generative AI tools. So this is the AI that can really excel at those creative tasks. Now, I have a crowdsourced list of available AI tools. Serenity has my permission to share. You could look up the list that I have if you're interested to look into all the different things. And also, if you want to add something to the list, I'd be more than happy to have you comment, because you might know stuff that I don't, frankly. But when I talk about generative AI, you can generate anything. You can even generate videos, movies. Now, a lot of the special effects are done by generative AI in some cases. But I'm going to talk specifically about large language models for a lot of this lecture. So this is what we think of like as a chat app. This is the customer service bot that you're interacting with, and it's probably still frustrating you, just like the human does. So the system, in this case, we're still moving from left to right, generates text or images using its previously built model of the statistical distributions of those tokens. So it knows from its data set how probable it is that certain chunks of words, punctuation marks, pixels, etc., would occur in a certain sequence. And that's, created from its very large training data set. Literally, I think OpenAI has used all of the data that's on the internet, which just boggles my mind. So from left to right, we're still training the model on that upper path. And so once we build the system, then it can create these really interesting things, like docs, chats, images, but also it might make mistakes, or what we say is hallucinate. That's what we say for their mistakes. Based on the limitations of its process. The thing is to keep in mind, the output still might look like what you want it. So just like if you're hallucinating, maybe I'm hallucinating, there's twice as many people in this room as there actually is. I'm still pretty close to the mark. There are people in this room and a number of the seats are filled. I'm close to the truth. It's not the truth. But for some purposes, that might be good enough. And for other purposes, like if I need to report how many people were in this room, that would not be good enough. I need the ground truth. I need the actual number. So this is where you really have to verify and reflect and maybe revise things. And usually even if it's not making mistakes, the output just isn't as good sometimes as a human when they're really on their game. So this guy, Ted Chiang, he's a science fiction author, awesome guy. He wrote the book that became that movie, Arrival, with Amy Adams, which is a fantastic book. I'm kind of split on the movie. Anyway, he has an interesting analogy for what these large language models are doing. He calls it either an unreliable photocopier. So you might put it in and you're getting a copy, but the copy isn't quite exact. He also talks about a blurry JPEG. That's an image format. And so when you have a blurry picture, it's the same idea. You might recognize it as the Eiffel Tower, but you can't pick out all of the details. And possibly, if you weren't really familiar with the shape of the Eiffel Tower, you might think it was Seattle's Space Needle or something like that. So this is important to remember. They do make a lot of mistakes. Now, we can ask it questions, and this is a very specific type of questions known as prompts. For like your customer service chatbot, they're not going to use that word. They're going to put it more into human speak. But in the professional realm, we describe them as prompts. And a good prompt has this kind of a structure. Like, I'm inputting some text. Here's a fragment of text. Tell me how this fragment might, what can I, where can we go with this in some way? I'll have a goal for you of like, turn this into a talk, for instance, or turn this into a biography. And then I wouldn't actually use this word, but what I want them want the model to think about is according to your model of the statistics of whatever I'm trying to generate. This could be human language, it could be human handled images. What words or pixels are likely to come next. This is basically what I'm trying to do when I enter a prompt, is to follow this kind of a structure. But I won't use those exact words. This is more the intent of what that prompt is trying to do. Okay, and so this is something, I actually don't have my laptop up here, but here's something I'll maybe do at the end, but I have data protected versions of AI models that are licensed to me through UNC Charlotte. And so we use both Google Gemini and Microsoft Copilot. And so I'm going to say this about this, I think there's a lot of useful AIs out there, that are free to use. You're definitely getting a better AI model if it's licensed or you're paying for it in some way. They're not going to give away the good stuff for free. And the good stuff is less likely to hallucinate. It's less likely to have biases. It still will have some biases, but it'll be less likely. So I have a lot of success with the paid versions of Gemini and Copilot that the university pays for me to use. And they also pay for them because they don't want me to share intellectual property or sensitive data with a giant corporation. So our agreement says, you don't use our data, for any purposes. So, but you can use it for lots of things. Like we could write a short prayer, for instance. We could do lots of different things. And some of it might be kind of unintentionally funny what it outputs, but it could also be pretty interesting. So I'll go back to that. There's another slide later where I can do a live demo. So then the next section of this talk, we need to put the tool to work. And so that's where specify, verify, and revise comes into play. So AI, which now is statistical pattern matching. What does that enable? There's this idea of what I call pattern extrapolation. So that's just like if I establish the pattern, just like if I'm a drummer and I start the beat for the song, other people can pick it up. You can learn it and keep it going. You can also do synthesis and summary. And so you can take a lot of data and boil it down into a few key phrases. You can also just summarize what's going on. And then, now we have some models, maybe they can do some reasoning. This is an interesting subject. Some of us would say that's the wrong word for what these models are doing. Other people think, yeah, we are actually teaching them how to reason through things. So that's kind of an open question right now. And so what we can think about here, regardless of what's actually happening, let's reframe AI as a helpful assistant who's available to work. And so we know it's really good with, extending a pattern. And so it can provide this predictive text, maybe on your phone or in your email. So I do this all the time. It's time consuming to think of a reply. But luckily, my Gmail says, hey, you could reply with this, say to Serenity, like, great, thanks. It's very easy. I'm like, yeah, I agree with that. Let's do that. It also provides you those recommendations on your video streaming services. So Netflix or Amazon Prime or Hulu, they get to know you pretty well, at least whoever is using your account. It might not just be you. And they'll start recommending things based on, if I watched a lot of World War II documentaries, I suddenly start seeing World War II documentaries and movies being recommended in my streaming service. So I like that use of AI. That helps save me time. And I actually enjoy targeted ads because I'm a busy person and I don't have time to shop, and it gets to know what I like to buy. And great, everybody wins. Not everybody likes those though. Yeah, for synthesis and summary, you could use it to list the key points of an email or a newsletter. Sometimes those things are really long. Just feed it into the AI and ask it, can you just give me the dates and times of volunteer opportunities? Great use of it. Or maybe just boil it down to the key points. There are students who write me pages and pages in email, and I do read it. But I also asked the AI to just tell me, what were the 2 things they asked me for? I can't find it. And I think also on that note, they are great tutors. This is like having a great course that, is in your house and that, is fairly low cost. You can ask it to tutor you on a topic. And so, it'll know a lot about things that are already on the internet and that we know we have a lot of factual information about. So a historical event is one idea. It could also be a gardening technique. There's lots of things the AI can teach you about. You do, again, have to challenge it occasionally. Like, is that for real? How do you know that? That's always a good question to ask. And I even ask it more specifically, give me your real world source for that. I don't want a made up source. I want one that actually exists. Because if I don't get that specific, it's going to do what's easiest, which is make it up. And then finally, when we think about reasoning, here are some things that definitely is a real thing right now that these things can do. So navigation apps, this is a great thing. I'm always getting lost. I have a bad sense of direction. There's a lot of weird streets in Charlotte. But the nice thing is when I'm using an navigation app in my car, it already knows and can detect when there's traffic, and it will route me around that. And that might not be the same route it will send me on next time. It's smart enough, and also it's connected to all this other data that's happening to, in real time, change what we're doing without asking me, and that's fine. That's what I delegated it, the navigation. And also I've used it for this. You can create a day-to-day itinerary for a trip with your friends. You can tell it things about your friends. Like I have one friend who loves to go to museums. She loves to learn things when we're on vacation. I don't want to learn anything. I just want to be on the beach. I just want a margarita. So I can ask AI to find things to do for us, that's a happy medium or that makes sure everybody gets what they want. It can even, find flights and hotel suggestions. So here's the thing also to keep in mind here. Like any eager to please human assistant, AI will always give you an answer, an output, something. It's not gonna not reply. And it's not gonna say, I don't know. It's gonna come up with something. It wants to please you. Whether that something is actually what you wanted, makes logical or practical sense, such as sending you into a river if you're driving, or is trustworthy and unbiased. Maybe the hotel chain is subsidizing what the AI is telling you. That's up to you to judge. The AI is not going to help you with those things. You still have to think intelligently, just like with a human. Why do they keep recommending Hilton as our hotel? I don't get it. Is it because I'm a member or because Hilton is subsidizing the search results in this LLM? That could be. I don't mean to call them out. I don't know what they're doing. I like Hilton. So you should experiment with how to prompt your AI assistants. And so one significant factor in the quality of the output is the prompt. That's the instructions that the user gives to the AI to begin the interaction. So what I like to do, first of all, I do want to make it specific, detailed, and also concise. I don't want to get lost in the details. But I do want to be very specific about what I want. And I have to think a little bit about what are some easy ways this could go wrong. So for instance, I know it's prone to giving me sources and references that are made up. So I will tell it, I want a real world source. I want a real world reference. I want a web link for the reference. it should give, you should give the LLM also a persona or a role to play and a goal. So I tell it, pretend you're a professor at UNC Charlotte. Pretend that, sell it as much context as you think it needs. Pretend you are a congregant at Covenant Presbyterian, and you're planning what to wear for the upcoming TLC trip. And then you will tell it, like, my goal is I want to have something to wear that will be easy for me to spend all day in, even though I'm walking around and I might go from a hot bus to an air-conditioned building. So that way it knows the context and it knows the objectives. What's going to make you happy? What are you actually trying to do? So here's the other thing then. When you've done all that, you are going to follow the 3-step process I've talked about for how you work with your assistants. First of all, you're going to be specific, right? You're going to specify. So that prompt is going to have as much concrete, concise detail as you can to get exactly the results that you want, or something close. Usually it doesn't get me exactly where I want to be, but it gets me far. But then you're going to verify. You're going to check the output and determine where it needs improvement or correction, just like with a human assistant. I've never had a human assistant who didn't need some sort of verification or supervision. That's why they're an assistant. If they weren't, if they didn't have those issues, they would have a different job. And then revise. So before using the output, change the content, the tone, the words used, etc., to make it more your own and 100% the best it can be. So if I had an assistant or an intern, I'm not sending their work out the door without checking it, but I'm also probably going to change it just a little bit. Again, they're probably not perfect. They're probably not exactly doing things the way that I want them done. And it would be my name that would be impacted, not the intern's name or the assistant's name. So this is how you can avoid those really embarrassing things that show up in the news, such as lawyers who use these tools and they make up cases. And this is for like somebody's real life lawsuit. And then the judge and the clerks are like, what is this? This is a complete fabrication. This is really embarrassing. They did not verify or revise. And so the thing is too, sometimes it doesn't do a good job at all. And you might need to start over with a different AI thread altogether. You might even need to switch products. Sometimes I do that. I go back and forth between Google Gemini and Microsoft Copilot. And I see, that day, I don't know why, Copilot might not be doing a good job for me. Maybe I forgot to log in, so it doesn't know it's me. Maybe I need to go to the other one. And if neither one makes me happy, I do have a ChatGPT account that I pay for. I just don't like to use it a lot because it comes right out of my own pocket, but I will go to it. I don't like their models necessarily better than anybody else's. So there's no reason not to use the one that my employer is paying for. Okay, so this is the part where I did want to do a live demo. So I'm going to step out of camera range momentarily. And we're going to give it a persona and a goal on my laptop. That's okay. And yeah, let me go. I'm going to, oh, you're good. It's still showing up on the screen. So I'm going to go to Gemini and I'm going to say, let's say, I'm going to give it the persona of pretend. Oh, and I forgot to log in. Oh, no, I am logged in. Okay. I don't usually see this many ads on the screen. That's what made me a little uncertain. So pretend that you are a member of the Covenant Presbyterian Church in Charlotte, NC. And then let me go back and see what was the goal. It was, let's just copy paste. You need to brainstorm. Describe how to do this and then do it. Yeah, so let's see how it does. And you see it's thinking. I'll come back up to the front for a minute. Yeah, so it's not instantaneous. And I like what it's doing right now. It's telling you what it's thinking about as it does it. And if I wanted to, I could have expanded that arrow to see all the steps it's going through. And that's kind of nice because especially if I gave it a really hard thing to do. And so I didn't ask it to do this, but it gave it in the form of a presentation. And so it's writing it as if it's a script. So greetings, friends and fellow members. You know, and so it talks a lot, right? So this is a kind of a word vomit that it does. It's not going to be concise, but I do pick out the things, and this one is nice because it's helping me because it's bolding the key takeaways. You know, this is how we're going to do it. We're going to listen, brainstorm, and mobilize. And it's also trying to scroll for me at the rate that it thinks an average human would be able to read. I get impatient though. I usually scroll to the bottom first. But yeah, so thinking about the listening process, the brainstorming process, and the mobilization process. And so one thing I like, the reason I asked it first to write how to do this and then to do it, I think I get better results when I first ask it to reflect on how will you do the thing that I asked you to do. That's just like a human. You know, I'll do that with my interns and my students. Like, you know, I want you to do this assignment. Um, what do you think is the best way to proceed? What's the first step you're going to do? And then they'll explain. And then I might say, oh, maybe that's a good idea. What's the next step? You know, so I'll talk them through that and help correct that. You know, I might do several prompts like that with this. I'll say, well, I don't think that really came out well. Let's think about the process, and then we can repeat with a change to that process. So it really is true. These things are built using human data, and it's surprising how much the things that I would do with a human really translates to this type of AI. The things that work in your work life or with your kids, they're also going to work with these AIs. So I'm going to go back to the back and just scroll a little bit, and then we'll just see the end of it, and then I'll go back to my slides. So here, then it's going to list a lot of interesting ideas. The covenant connection. I love it. Yeah, I'll send it to you. A general event planning checklist. That's amazing. I need that. Possible outreach and service initiatives. Wow. I mean, partnership with a local CMS school. I love that idea. College connection. Oh, wow. That's really cool. Yeah. So look at that. That's amazing. I love all these ideas. The thing is, though, it was a lot of words. That's interesting that you say that. I bet you're right. Yeah, it's just regurgitating things it's already seen. Yeah, I don't, you know better than I do, and I think that's a good point. It didn't really think of anything new. It just repackaged stuff that it found from the internet. Yeah. So yeah, you'd be like, did we get any new ideas? Probably not, you know, but that's just a demo. You could go further with it. You could say, you know, try to come up with some ideas that this church hasn't already done. You know, like maybe there's a church at a similar sized city in the United States. You know, what are some ideas from their website? Okay. And then the last part of this, because I want to make sure you have time for questions, I do want to talk a little bit about how to use the tool with wisdom. And so this is really, to me, the stewardship part, where you always have to think about guardrails for human benefits. So I'm not going to show this video, but I will just say human bias is inevitable. This is a human created thing. It doesn't do anything without humans every step of the way. So let me keep going. Okay. We do have this phenomenon of overtrust. It's been with us for a long, long time with automation and AI. So, even with statistical pattern matching, which is how I want you to think about it, why does that happen? We might go on autopilot. I think my students, when they get into trouble with AI, sometimes they're not actually thinking about, why, that reference might be made up. And they're rationalizing observed failures. There's that video I was going to show was a funny dramatization of another type of AI, which is computer vision, but it was developed by light-skinned people. And the first computer vision systems couldn't see Black people because they never thought about it. They weren't testing them in the lab with anybody but themselves. And so then they put them out in the world, and suddenly lights wouldn't go on in a room if a Black person walked in. Oh, there's lots of things like that. That now I think that's mostly fixed. I've never never seen it happen recently in real life, but it was a big problem for a while with that technology. And yeah, it's so the rationalization there would be, well, at least it does see white people. It works half the time. That's not good. And this image I had AI draw, it kind of got to what I wanted it to draw, but you see it did not write the word trust. It has a lot of problems still with writing words and with fingers. Most images of people have like 6 or 7 fingers. We do perceive it sometimes to be low risk, and I think it just depends on the context. If, I do have to verify, the outputs. I don't want to go on a vacation, for instance, and find that it sent me to a very high crime area or something. I need to, that's actually, vacation planning seems low risk, but not really if you get some bad information. There's also, in my world, there's a lot of social pressure and conformity. If I was anti-AI, that would be very difficult in my job. I'm not anti-AI. I'm very pro-AI. But that's a thing we all have to deal with whatever technologies are common in our social circles. So a lot of people tell you to trust the system. You'll see others trust the system. So like if your kids or your neighbors or your other relatives are like, oh yeah, we can just use ChatGPT for this. This is not a problem. Yeah, trust but verify. Just make sure that if you are using it, you're using it with wisdom and purpose. And we all have individual differences. Here's an individual difference that really matters is whether you're an expert or a non-expert. So what we found again and again is that experts will notice when something seems off and be able to respond. Non-experts won't notice. And that could be unless or until the outcomes are very bad. So that's something I'm trying to be more mindful of myself right now with how I teach my students to use AI. I've had to realize I'm an expert. It's pretty easy for me to figure out when there's a hallucination or a bias in the outcome. My students aren't that good at it. And so now I have to help them a little more, I've realized, with that because they're just not approaching it. They're a different type of person than me when they approach this technology. But I do want them to learn to use it. It's going to be part of their world, and they're going to be at a disadvantage if they don't learn how to use it responsibly. So when I was growing up in the 1980s and going to computer camp, they taught us this great phrase, which is garbage in, garbage out. That's all through computing. That's always been true. If you feed garbage into a system, it's going to give you garbage outputs. And I'm not going to go through all of this, just to note that human biases can creep in at any point in the AI data pipeline. That often starts with the variety of data collected. So AI is used a lot for hiring. This is a huge issue. Huge, huge issue. If it was trained on a data set where white men are getting the best jobs, it might infer that white men are the most qualified for those jobs. And it can work for other things too. if it gets trained on data, say that white women or Black women are getting the majority of the nursing jobs, if you're a man in nursing, you're also going to be at a disadvantage. So there's lots of different ways that the data can be biased in hiring right now, in ways that we don't often think about, and that systems that are built can't always really effectively correct for. It's not like you can get different data. We're always looking backwards in time when we look at data. It's always historical. We don't always want to do the same things that we did in the past, but AI is kind of locked in the past in that way, in how they think about things. So I'm not gonna go through all of these various problems that are throughout the process. That is part of what I research at the university. I do want to make sure to hit these things. You should always seek truth, always verify important information. You should be alert for hallucinations, biases, and simply odd outputs. And yeah, like somebody immediately recognized with the live demo, oh, it's just picking up information from our website. Yeah, that's a good thing to notice. That means you wanted new ideas, not the same ones you always have. Keep the human centered. You want to prioritize real human connection over automated processes or messages. So do reflect on when AI seems appropriate and when the human is getting lost. I don't know that you guys are going to have that problem versus some of the audiences that I talk about. A church is a very human-centered, human prioritizing institution, but it is something I do worry about a lot in our society. And do be good stewards. So protect personal and sensitive information. So you should use AI products that have some sort of data security and privacy guarantees. Now, my students say, how do I know that it's really doing what it says it's going to do? You don't. That is the problem, right? We don't right now have any kind of regulation like we do for, say, food and drugs, where they verify that the ingredients are good for you. So that will probably change at some point. But for now, we just have to take some things on trust and just, be appropriately wary. Use things that can help you, but always kind of be on guard. Like I said, you want to specify, verify, and revise. Okay, so to summarize, we're going to understand AI as a tool. It's not a brain. It's not really your friend, even though it's friendly. You do use AI as a helpful assistant, though. So, think about what would you trust an assistant to do and what could go wrong. So I think about biases and errors in the output. It could simply be, it's not going to give me anything good. There's lots of things that could go wrong, because that helps you think about how to prompt it and also how you're going to verify and revise the output. And you should reflect on your successes. It's important to recognize when you're doing a great job with it, as well as mistakes in learning to use the tool. And so do prioritize that human connection, and do protect your and others' sensitive personal information. Okay, so that's what I have to say, and I'm eager to hear your questions.
Is there a way to work your prompts so that you avoid that implied bias, such as your human resources example?
That's a good question. Yeah, I would probably think about, like, what are some common biases that I want to avoid. First of all, I would write it down for myself, like on a piece of paper. And so, for instance, I would say, this is true. I actually have way more women than men in my research group. I kind of worry about this. I want a diverse group. I want to be inclusive. And part of that is just making sure that people get to work with different types of people and experience that. So I might say, like, if I'm feeding it a bunch of resumes, look for, a list of 3 students who have the kind of qualities I'm looking for. I'll give it the qualities, and I'll say, among those who otherwise are equally qualified, I have a slight preference for the male identifying students. And I'll look at that, and maybe I'll also think about it and reflect on it. And I might say, now, what if I didn't have that guideline? You know, would you change the list of top students that you think meet my qualifications? Just because I want to have something to compare it against. You know, so I have to make the ultimate judgment. I don't want to outsource the judgment to AI. If I do feel that 3 women are the most qualified, I might want to hire those people. But if I look at that male resume that they pick out and I go, you know what, he's really close. Like we could easily spend another 5 hours in training with him, and he's right up there with that other candidate. Then I want to be able to make that decision. But I think too that I probably wouldn't ask an AI to do any of that. But that's because I have very few resumes. I do have a lot of sympathy for employers who have hundreds and hundreds of resumes flooding in within 24 hours. I don't see how anybody can go through those without machine help. And they're probably not thinking about this as carefully as I am. They're thinking, how do I just get this done? But that's also something where we as technologists can build in a guideline that to the AI itself that says, even if they don't ask for it, you should give them these different lists of top candidates, you know, and prompt the human to make the ultimate judgment. It's not appropriate for this machine to make the ultimate judgment. But that itself is a judgment, and the customer might not like that. These are difficult dilemmas to work through. Yeah.
You mentioned Gemini and Copilot. Do you use Grok? And when would you use each of these? What is one thing that each is best at?
Oh, that's a good question. So I have used models like Claude. Is that the one you asked about? Oh, Jira. Okay. Um, yeah, I have used Grok. Yeah, I think they are trained in different ways, and that's part of how they advertise the product. So Grok is trained supposedly because they want to make it very free speech friendly. They don't want to give it a lot of guidelines. They don't want it to not swear. They want it to talk to you like you're like somebody who's going to like talk to you bluntly, you know, as well as do some reasoning and help you understand what's going on in the world and explain. It can actually be used for lots of things. I actually like Grok. I don't like the people who built Grok. But I do think it's a really useful tool. I think it's a great model. They publish these benchmarks of how models perform, and it's performing extremely well. But I will say this about Grok or Claude, about a lot of other models that I didn't talk about. They're all kind of doing the same. You know, if one month one is not doing as well as the other models, that company is bringing it up to standard. So it's kind of a commodity. I don't think you can go wrong with almost any model, to be honest. Whether it's Grok, Claude, Copilot, ChatGPT, the paid version. I think they're all performing at basically the same level on a lot of different benchmarks. So that's kind of a nice thing for us as consumers. They're all going to behave pretty much the same way and perform in the same way. There might be some slight differences. Even within Gemini, there's a little drop-down menu. I can switch the model that I want, and it'll have a little tooltip that pops up that says, this model is good at this, and this model is good at this. So if I'm trying to do anything that involves math, these large language models, they do not do well at math or logical thinking, which is ironic because usually that is what computers are good at, is math and logical thinking. But it's just different than, these are probabilities. These models work off probabilities, not deterministic logic models. So it's actually really hard for them to do like, what is 2 + 2, you know, and get the right answer. which is so weird. But there are certain models that are specifically being built now and trained for what we call deep reasoning. You can try them. I mean, I'm not sure I do get great answers from them for what I need AI for, but other people do find those very helpful for specific tasks. So that would be my one recommendation now. Look for the deep reasoning models. See if those are better. No, no, and it'll be advertised. They'll have in the description of the model what it really does well. And they might draw a comparison. Like this is really good for conversation. This other one is really good for research, and so I would just trust the labels that they put on the models. The other thing I care about is how big is the model. So if I want to build an application that lives on somebody's phone, it cannot be a very big AI model because there's only so much memory and storage that you have on a phone. And so then I might pick a light model versus one that lives in the cloud, like the ones I showed in the demo that you would access through the internet. And those can live on a server farm where they can be very, very large. And so they're very, very good, but they're very, very expensive. So, and also there's the stewardship issue with data. I'd sometimes prefer a small model that can't do things because it's not sending data off into the universe. It's just keeping my data on my device. And sometimes that's my highest priority. Mhm.
Should stay away from the free models, or how valuable would Chat GPT or Gemini be in the free model?
I mean, I think the free models are okay. I just think they're terrible for usually the things that I need the AI to help me with are things where the free model is not, I notice the difference, Like I can notice if I ask Gemini to do something and I suddenly realize I'm on my free Gmail account. I notice it. And then I'm like, oh, I gotta get on the Charlotte account so that it actually can do me some good. And also for my students, I tell them, don't be using these free models for anything because they're gonna just do a mediocre job. I'm gonna spot it right away that you used an AI without telling me. Um, it's gonna be really bad work. Lots of hallucinations. 3 times as long as it needed to be. It's still pretty long, even with the good models. But yeah, I don't know, for your purposes, you can make your own judgment. You can use free ChatGPT, which is pretty easy. It's out there. It's got a really nice app. It's got a really nice interface. And you can make your own judgments. And I think the plan I'm paying for is it's like pay as you go. So it ends up I spend like $20 a month for ChatGPT Plus or whatever thing I'm actually paying for. So you might find that that's within your budget, at least to try for 1 month and to see. And you might say, you know what? Even though Dr. Cori said she hates those free models, I think it's fine, and that's okay. I mean, you need to do you. It's just I'm speaking as somebody who really does notice a difference and has seen my students get into trouble with those free models.
So I had a question around just how different like the education system now is, like with having this as a resource. So I'm just curious on the plagiarism piece and like how, I don't know, how are professors approaching that now? And can you just like take what they've written in a paper and then paste it into ChatGPT? Was this ChatGPT? Is there a way to check it?
There is no way. There's no way to check it in a way that's reliable and valid and that would hold up, say, in a disciplinary proceeding. Yeah, this is a big challenge to all of us. So, but one of my colleagues put it into perspective for me. He said, the thing is, Cori, there's always been cheating. There's been cheating before computers. There was cheating in mainframes. There's cheating with desktop computers. There's cheating with the internet. There's cheating now. It's just now it's democratized cheating. It's brought down the price of cheating. And I think that's very true. I think, when I was going through college the first time, there were friends of mine who were making good money writing papers for other students, and I didn't. probably, I mean, I don't think it was my ethical stance. It was just, I just literally didn't have the time to do something like that. And certainly there have always been students who had other people write their programming code for them. Eventually they're going to hit a wall. It might be when they're hired, right? At some point, they're going to realize they don't actually know what they need to know, and that's going to be the real price that they pay. The other thing is, though, we have had to change how we do assessments, because if it is very low cost now to cheat, where there's like a free tool out there, the tool might even be built into your learning system. ChatGPT has been trying to get into education in a big way. So have all the other models. We have to rethink a few things. So for instance, having students actually write a computer program in class while you're watching them on a piece of paper. Maybe they don't write all the code, but we can do what's called pseudocode, where you write the logical statements. Like first, we're going to set this variable, then we're going to set this variable. And then if that variable is greater than this, you're going to do one thing. And if it's not, you're going to do the other thing. So you can write out a set of logical statements like that to test somebody's knowledge of how to tell the program what to do. And then we can have them go put it into the computer and run it. This is a very old school way of teaching programming, but in some ways we do have to go back to, say, the 1960s, 1970s, and think about what could we borrow from the past before we had all these cool technologies. I've been thinking about putting an exam in one of my classes on paper instead of having it on the computer, because I'm thinking about how difficult it will be to verify that while they're on their laptops taking the exam, they're not quickly popping over to ask Copilot for a question. And I also have to reflect on what are my goals, though. So if I'm not sure that's a bad thing for my class, I really do want to teach my students how to use AI to their advantage. And I'm teaching an upper level class. So my colleagues who teach the first years and second years, where we really have to verify that they're getting the basics down, this is a huge problem for them because they don't really have an option. They have to assess correctly that the students met the learning objectives so that they can go on to the next classes. I don't want those students showing up in my class not knowing the fundamentals. But at my level now, I'm teaching things that are more discretionary and more a matter of judgment. I teach usable security and privacy. And for that, you really have to think about the context of something, the threat model, what we know about human nature, about usability. We do have to think about biases in human judgment. And it's an interesting question because now I'm like, well, in their professional lives, when they put this into practice, it's not realistic to think that they wouldn't use AI, just like an assistant, to help them think through some of these things. Maybe I would be doing the wrong thing if I don't let them use the AI. I'm on the side of not letting them use the AI for the test, but I do always let them use AI for the assignments and for the projects, because I do want them to make mistakes now before they get into the working world. So I'm not sure mine is the right attitude. We're all just kind of feeling this out. We're going to see what happens. That's what we always do.
Yes.
So yes, there's always been cheating. One of the concerns that I have for my boys in particular and their classmates, are you concerned about the loss of critical thinking with AI?
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
obviously, we can do the specify, the verify, the revise. I can teach them that. I was a librarian at one point. I know how to teach them how to research, and I can try to teach them to use their own brains, but I'm really worried that they're not going to know how to really dig deep into something because they can have a paragraph printed out for them.
Yeah, that's the biggest worry I have, is that students won't learn how to learn because they're able to outsource that now to a tool. AI won't be free forever. It's actually very, very expensive to run AI. they're losing a massive amount of money with those free tools because they're trying to build up this, they want you hooked on it. That's how they're going to make their money in the future. So we won't always have this problem because it'll be resource constrained again to cheat. But this is a huge problem that I don't have an answer for. And I really feel for the parents who have to think about how do I get these kids internally motivated to do the work that maybe their classmates aren't doing, right? They always look to their peers for what's right or wrong. And that's so tough right now. It's so tough. I think that's the only thing you can do is try to transmit your values. And I do think the people who win in the AI age are going to be the people who keep those human values and who still can keep up a high level of human cognition. Because one thing AI is never going to be good at is transformative creativity. And so that's the kind of thing where I'm trying to create knowledge. You know, you're trying to create knowledge. All of us have a job in this world where we're creating things, bringing things into existence that didn't exist before. And, you know, AI is just looking at that historical data. It can't think of anything new. So humans always will be able to think of new things and create new knowledge, hopefully. If we lose the ability to do that, though, that's when we're going to be in trouble. And yeah, this is another thing we're just going to have to see what happens. I don't have a good solution for it, except always cautioning my students, you know, you have to stay competitive. You know, in the robot war, we have to win. Mhm. Oh, yeah. Mhm. Oh, good. Thank you for calling me out on that. There's so much jargon. I'm glad that you brought that up. So it stands for large language models. So let me go back a couple more slides. So so large language models, I often say LLMs when I'm thinking about AI, because those are the chatbots. Those are the ones that you can speak human language to, either by typing out, or like Alexa is a large language model, or kind of is, not really under the hood, but you can talk to them and they'll talk back in human language. So that's what I mean by LLM. Thanks for asking that question. Yeah, I've given a copy to Serenity, and so she'll be able to share them with you. Yeah.
Any other questions? Well, thank you, Dr. Cori.
Thanks for all your good questions.